In this episode, we're going to set up and render a Moho project file for compositing. First, I'll teach you how to break out a scene using the Layer Comps window. Then, I'll show you how to use Moho Exporter to render multiple layers for compositing programs like After Effects, Fusion, and Nuke. Hey, welcome back to Little Green Dog's animation tutorial series. The version of Moho we'll be using is 14.3. If you're a compositing artist and new to Moho, you'll be happy to hear that Moho has two features that make rendering layers for your favorite compositing package easy. Well, mostly easy. The compositing program I'll be using in this tutorial is After Effects, but this workflow is appropriate for any compositing package. If you don't use a compositing program, and you don't know if you even need one, I'll explain why compositing is so awesome in another tutorial. But stick around. You might learn new tricks, and we can use the watch hours. So, what is the Layer Comps window? The Layer Comps window is used to create visibility bookmarks for the Layers window. These bookmarks are called Layer Comps. I use Layer Comps to help me focus on specific layers. Here's an example. In this Space Tommy scene, I have a layer comp that shows only Space Tommy. I'll use this layer comp when I want to focus on rigging or animating Space Tommy. Then I have layer comps that separate Tommy's body parts so I can shade them individually. I also have layer comps that show different levels of the environment. Here's the distant background, distant asteroids, closer asteroids, and the asteroids that go in front of Space Tommy. Separating the asteroids like this also helps me work more efficiently with Moho's physics engine. Finally, when I need to see everything put together, I activate the Master Layer Comp. For compositing artists, the Layer Comps window can be used to break out a scene for their favorite compositing package. Let's go through the workflow using a simpler project file. Here's a Moho project I animated for a recent tutorial. When I made this, I used a character template file, so my layer comps were present before I animated the character. I'll show you how to use template files in a future lesson, but for right now, let's pretend these layer comps never existed by removing them. Okay, let's begin. I'm going to create my master layer comp by clicking the Add New Layer Comp button at the bottom of the window. I'll name this layer comp 00_master. The 00 part is there to keep this layer comp at the top of the list. The master layer comp will show only the layers for the complete scene. So right now, I would hide any layers I don't wish to see, which could include tracing images and other reference layers. Everything looks good, so I'm going to update the settings for the master. To update the settings, click the Update button at the bottom of the window. I'll add a new layer comp and call this one 01_artist. I like to number the layers to keep them in a specific order. Numbering the layer comps is optional. However, I do recommend adding the zeros for the master layer comp. When there are many layer comps in the list, forcing the master layer comp to the top makes it easier to find. For the artist layer comp, I want to hide everything but the artist rig. And I'm also going to hide his right arm. Now I'll update this layer comp. Add a new layer and call this one 02_artist arm. This layer comp shows only the right arm. The reason for separating the right arm is so I can comp it in front of the desk. It is possible to adjust the Z position of the arm within the rig, but since I'll be compositing this shot in another program, that won't be necessary. Okay, I'll update this layer comp and add another one. Call this layer comp 03_desk. Hide the artist layers, show the desk layer, and click Update. The next layer comp is 04_ Backdrop. This layer contains a solid white rectangle. Without this layer, Moho would render a transparent background. Now update the backdrop layer comp. Finally, I'll add a layer comp called Overlay. This one has the paper texture used in our tutorial animations. Update this layer comp. Now let's talk about activating layer comps, which is different from selecting them. To select a layer comp, you simply click on it. But to activate a layer comp, you need to hold the Alt key and click on it. There are other key combos, but that's the important one, and probably the one you'll use most of the time. If you don't remember the Alt key shortcut, you can do this instead. Click on the layer comp you wish to activate, and then click the Expose Visibility button down here. It's the one with the eyeballs. The other buttons down here are for timeline visibility, show all layers, and hide all layers. There are keyboard shortcuts for these as well, but I don't use them often enough to bother memorizing them. Before we go any further, let's save a copy of this project. I'll keep the current name, but revise it to version 2. When using any creative program, it's a good idea to save frequently and save many incremental versions. There are few things more heartbreaking than losing all your work because of a random crash or power outage. We're almost at the rendering stage, but first, I'd like to show you my file structure and naming convention. This will be important for rendering with Moho Exporter. When we look at my project folder in Explorer, we'll see a folder called Work. This contains the work in progress versions of the project file. Version 1 is the original version of the project, and version 2 is the one where I recreated the layer comps. When I'm ready to render a project, I'll save an unnumbered version outside of the work folder. Let's do that now. I'll jump back into Moho, choose Save As, step out of the work folder, remove the version number, and save the file. This will be the render version of the project. The reason we need an unnumbered version is that Moho Exporter takes the output file name from the project's file name, and unfortunately, that includes the project's version number when it's present. For compositing artists, having the version number in the render output can be a major annoyance, if not a full-blown nightmare, because revisions to the render will never overwrite the previous renders. And this can really mess up your comp. So, saving a render version of your project that doesn't have the version number in its name is highly recommended. I'm hopeful that a future version of Moho will allow us to set a preferred output file name and destination folder, as other animation and compositing programs do. To me, the logical place for these settings in Moho would be in the Project Settings window. Okay, let's move on to the next stage. Moho Exporter is Moho's batch rendering window. It allows us to render multiple project files in a queue. And it has one special feature not many users know about. We'll get to that in a few minutes. To open Moho Exporter, choose the command from the File menu, or press Ctrl-B. If any project files are currently open, Exporter will load them automatically. In this example, only the artist project was loaded, but if we had other projects open, they would also appear here. In this situation, we would want to remove the extra projects. To do this, we would select the unwanted project files and click the Remove button. I'm not going to do this now because this is the file I want to render. Okay, we're ready to set up our render queue. And just so you know, I'm going to do this twice. The first time, I'll talk through the steps and describe situations you might encounter, so this may appear more complicated than it actually is. Then, I'll do it again with no interruptions and sidebars, and hopefully the steps will look easier the second time around. The first thing we want to do is set the file format and render path. I already have my file format set to PNG by default, so I only need to set the render path. To do this, right-click on the file, select Change Destination, and choose Folder. I like to save my renders to a shared footage folder, so I'll navigate there and create a folder called Moho. This project file is called Toot13.4, which means it's part of Tutorial 13 and it's shot number 4. So I'm going to make a folder called S004 for shot 4. I'll open this folder and click Select Folder. Now, if I hadn't previously set my format to PNG image sequence, or I need to change it to a different format, I would double-click on the project and choose my render options. The options we're interested in are Output Format, which I currently have set to image sequence and PNG, Overwrite Existing Files, and anything else you need, like multi-threaded rendering, anti-aliased edges, and extra smooth images. Once you have your settings defined, click Save as Default, and your config becomes the new default. Alright, let's talk about that lesser-known but very useful feature I mentioned earlier. It's the Split Selected Item button. When clicked, it splits the project into multiple render passes based on the layer comp settings. Let's do that. The project is now split into 6 projects, and here in the layer comp column, we see the names of each layer comp. Let's optimize the queue by removing any layer comps we don't need. We don't need to render the master, so select and remove it. Doink! Down here, we have the desk, backdrop, and overlay layer comps. These 3 have no animation, so I'll double-click on desk and set the frame range to end on frame 1. Now I'll repeat this for backdrop and overlay. This will improve our render time significantly, because now we're rendering only 1 frame of each of these layer comps. Okay, we're almost there. So we don't have to do this again for this project. Let's save an export profile. To do this, go to File, and save the profile in the shot folder. I'm going to call this S004 underscore export profile. Now, if we make a change to our animation later, all we need to do is open this profile and we'll be ready to render. Let's try it out. I'm going to select all the projects in our queue and remove them. Now open the profile. Hey guys, welcome back. At this point, we could start the render queue by clicking the Start button. But first, let's walk through this again, but this time with no interruptions. I'll clear the queue and close Moho Exporter. Ready? Let's go. Press Ctrl-B to open Moho Exporter. Right-click to set our output destination. Split the file. Remove any unnecessary renders. Reduce the render range to 1 for any layer comps that don't have animation. Save our export profile. And click Start. Alright, that took just under a minute to complete. Let's look at the output directory and see what we've got. One cool thing about Moho Exporter is that it automatically creates folders for each layer comp. Let's open Artist, and sure enough, here are the artist frames. I'll turn off the alpha channel. That'll make it easier to look at. That's better. The folder called ARM contains the ARM frames. Desk has the single desk frame. Backdrop has the single backdrop frame. And Overlay has a single frame of the paper texture. Let's pop over to After Effects and put it together. For recurring shots like this one, I like to use a template project. To create a new scene from a template, I select the placeholder footage and press Ctrl-H to replace it with the new footage. This shot is easy because I only need to replace the character and adjust the comp's length. Let's see how the layers stack up in the timeline. Backdrop, Artist, Desk, Arm, and the paper texture. Looks good. Now, if you're not a compositing artist, you might be wondering why I'm bothering to do this. I have a few good reasons. For example, by splitting out the layers, I'm able to stack the right arm over the desk more easily here than in Moho. And I'm able to set my frame interval on 2s using the Posterize Time plugin. Sure, I can set up the frame interval in Moho as well, but in my After Effects template, it happens here automatically. Also, I can change the frame interval at any time without re-rendering my frames. Finally, I added a levels adjustment to the paper texture, which in Moho wouldn't be an option. If this were a different shot, I might do much more with compositing, such as adding interactive lighting, motion blur, depth blurs, image processing, and adding visual effects like particles, distortion, or morphing. And last but not least, when I'm ready to render my comp, Adobe After Effects lets me connect to Adobe Media Encoder, which gives me more advanced control over output formats and codec settings. Here's another example. This shot was rendered from Moho and enhanced using a compositing program called Blackmagic Fusion. Compositing programs like Fusion and Nuke differ from After Effects because they use nodes instead of a layers window. But all compositing programs do more or less the same thing: merge footage from diverse sources, add effects, and make the final shot look better. So, while you can do a lot with Moho by itself, a good compositing program can lift your animation to the next level.
Again!
But if you are a compositor, then you already know that. And now, you know all this. Want to know more? Then I hope you'll come back because I'll be making more tutorials about using Moho with compositing programs. Right now, I hear music, and you know what that means. I want to thank everyone who became a Team Little Green Dog supporter on our Ko-fi page. Remember, when you send a one-time donation, you get access to the team content folder and you can download stuff. As a supporter, you also see your name in the credits for the next tutorial. Of course, you still get the octopus rig. I'll be adding more content later this week, and when I do, Ko-fi supporters and followers will be the first to know about it. And even if you're not ready to join, visit our Ko-fi page for news about the channel and upcoming videos. Thanks for watching, stay safe, have fun, and I'll see you soon.